Tonight, death in the desert. An off-road truck crashes into a Mojave Desert racetrack crowd, causing multiple deaths and injuries. I'm Russ Mitchell. Also tonight, the so-called Craigslist killer commits suicide in jail months before his trial on a charge of murder. More fallout from President Obama's controversial comments on the planned mosque near New York's Ground Zero. And 3D backlash, why Hollywood's hottest trend is leaving some top directors cold.
I don't need 3D. I'm a great storyteller. I don't need this so-called gimmick.
This is the CBS Evening News with Russ Mitchell.
And good evening. We begin tonight with an accident at a California racetrack that killed 8 people and injured a dozen more. The tragedy unfolded last night when an off-road truck plowed into spectators at a track in the Mojave Desert. Bill Whitaker is in Los Angeles tonight with the very latest. Bill, good evening.
Good evening, Russ. Off-road races like the California 200 are growing in popularity. Tonight, investigators are questioning witnesses, trying to figure out how things at such a popular spectator sport could go so terribly wrong. Fans who flock to this off-road race say getting in close to watch trucks careen through punishing twists and jumps is thrilling. Last night was deadly. A driver spun out of control and plowed into the crowd.
Dude, someone just flipped.
The white truck landed upside down, crushing people, killing 8, injuring 12 others.
And as soon as it hit, it rolled right on top and it just hit people and people flew. And
it was psychotic. I mean, people were screaming everywhere.
One girl that we knew had blood coming out of her ears, her mouth. There's another guy whose brain got smashed.
Spectators rushed to help. Witnesses say the driver ran away from angry spectators throwing rocks. With the track so remote and deep in the desert, it took emergency crews almost a half hour to respond. They found a scene of chaos and commotion.
We ended up transporting all the patients by air due to this remote location.
The California 200 is part of a popular circuit of off-road races in the state. Tens of thousands of fans watch as souped-up vehicles maneuver a torturous 200-mile course at speeds approaching 100 miles an hour. With little regulation, fans get as close as possible to the action.
They allow us to stand wherever we want on the track, so I mean, everyone gets as close as they can. I mean, it's exciting.
Jonathan Davey was close enough to get this stunning video.
I believe that if there was, some type of barricade protecting the spectators, I mean, it could have very well been avoided with the fatalities.
With the track now a crime scene and many of the injured still in the hospital, some fans are having second thoughts about their sport.
I don't care how big of a thrill it is to anybody. It's not worth it, losing your life over. It's not worth the risk.
This is just getting too dangerous for me, so it's just tragic.
So far, no charges have been leveled against the driver of the truck, 28-year-old Brett Sloppy. On his Facebook page, Mr. Sloppy says that he is incredibly devastated and sends his prayers out to the victims. The family of one of the victims tells CBS News that they too are devastated and are now considering taking legal action against the race organizers. Russ?
Bill Whitaker in Los Angeles. Thank you. On the opposite side of the country, authorities in Boston today reported the jailhouse death of Philip Markoff, who gained notoriety last year as the so-called Craigslist killer. John Bentley has more on Markoff's alleged crimes and the circumstances of his death.
Philip Markoff died behind bars Sunday morning in what Massachusetts authorities called an apparent suicide. The 24-year-old Boston University medical student was charged with the murder of Julissa Brisman, who Markoff met through the adult services section of the classified advertising website Craigslist. Prosecutors say after Brisman went to Markoff's Boston hotel room, he tied her up and shot her.
It appears that Ms. Brisman put up a fight. She sustained blunt head trauma to her skull.
Markoff was also charged in 2 other assaults that same week, one in Rhode Island, the other in Boston. Both victims were also solicited on Craigslist.
He just said, if you do everything you're asked, no harm's gonna come to you. I had about $800 in cash. He grabbed that, put that in his pocket.
CBS News' 48 Hours mystery producer Paul LaRosa wrote a book about Markoff's crime spree called 7 Days of Rage. He says that while some teachers described Markoff as brilliant, the police investigation found he had a dark side.
On one hand, he was the perfect medical student, a guy engaged to a beautiful woman. On the other hand, he had a deviant sexual life where he joined a lot of alternative lifestyle websites.
But it wasn't all about sex for Markoff. Drowning in a sea of medical school debt and struggling with a gambling problem, LaRosa says Markoff simply needed the money.
I talked to the 2 surviving women, and both of them told me that he didn't even touch them in a sexual way. He was there to rob them.
Markoff had pleaded not guilty to all charges, but was due to stand trial next March.
I know that he had tried to kill himself twice in the past. It's still shocking when somebody goes through with it.
The Markoff case has led to calls for Craigslist to completely drop its adult services. Craigslist refused and instead said they would monitor that site themselves, looking for any sign of illegal activity like prostitution. According to one internet monitoring service, adult ads constitute more than 1/3 of Craigslist revenue. John Bentley, CBS News, New York.
President Obama's comments on that proposed mosque near Ground Zero are continuing to stir controversy this weekend. As Chief White House correspondent Chip Reed tells us, it's casting a cloud over what was to have been a picture-perfect family outing.
The first family was treated to the sight of a frolicking porpoise as they finished up their weekend vacation on the Gulf Coast of Florida, a visit intended to highlight the fact that on most of the coast, the water is clean and the beaches are open. But the president's message was largely overshadowed by a political controversy of his own making as he poured fuel on an already raging debate over whether to build a mosque 2 blocks from the site of the 9/11 attacks in New York City.
In this country, we treat everybody equally in accordance with the law. Regardless of race, regardless of religion.
Back in Washington, the president's apparent support of the project dominated the Sunday talk shows as Republicans portrayed the president as out of touch.
I think it tells you that he has a very disdainful view of the American people.
The White House, the administration, the president himself seems to be disconnected from the mainstream of America.
But the president also seemed to back off from his initial comments, saying that while Muslims have the right to build the mosque, that doesn't mean they should.
I was not commenting, and I will not comment on the wisdom of making a decision to put a mosque there.
In a statement, the White House said the president is not backing off his original comments. Some Republicans say the White House is trying to have it both ways.
And the inference, or the clear impression everyone came away with, was that he was saying he was supporting the mosque at Ground Zero. And he can parse it later on and sort of back away. But the fact is, that is clearly the impression I believe he wanted to leave.
Republicans predicted the issue will help them in the November elections. But Democrats said the American people understand that freedom from religious discrimination is a fundamental constitutional value.
This wouldn't be a controversy if it was a proposal to build a synagogue or church. We don't prefer people and we don't punish people based on their religion.
On Monday, the president heads out on a 3-day cross-country trip where he'll be raising money and talking about the economy and hoping to leave this controversy over the New York mosque behind. Chip Reed, CBS News, Panama City Beach, Florida.
Whatever the political impact of the president's latest stand, it appears he has already been bumped as his party's most popular headliner. Manuel Gallegos has more now on the growing role of the Democrats' real first campaigner.
With First Lady Michelle Obama now more popular than the president, some congressional Democrats believe she's their secret weapon this fall.
I think she should be deployed as much as possible and as much as she's willing and able to help the cause.
CBS News has confirmed 4 Democrats have requested the First Lady on the campaign trail. First-term Congressman Gerald Connolly, who faces a close race in Virginia, calls Mrs. Obama a political asset.
It's critical that we make sure our base stays energized. Michelle Obama has, I think, enormous power in energizing the base and re-energizing the base where that's necessary.
The First Lady has won praise for her efforts to curb childhood obesity and promote healthy foods. She's also known for being a mom-in-chief and fashion icon.
Even if you're not necessarily
a big fan of Barack Obama's presidency and policies. There are a lot of people that still like Michelle Obama as a person and as a mother and as a role model.
Mrs. Obama spoke at this Democratic National Committee event in May, which raised $1 million. Last week, the White House indicated there may be more to come.
I anticipate that at some point she will likely make some appearances.
The First Lady is ahead of her husband in public opinion polls with an approval rating of 50%. But she received negative press for her recent trip to Spain, criticized as extravagant when many Americans are in need. Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez says Democrats do face a risk.
The danger is that she's setting a strange example with these mixed messages of I care about the plight of working families, but I take a lavish trip.
Democrats say the First Lady could still make a difference in certain races, just as she did on the campaign trail in 2008, when her nickname was the Closer. Manuel Gallegos, CBS News, New York.
And still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, the flood disaster that's disrupted 20 million lives. General David Petraeus said today he sees small pockets of progress in the war in Afghanistan. However, the newly installed commander of U.S. forces there would not predict whether U.S. forces would be able to start withdrawing next year as planned.
It would be premature to have any kind of assessment at this juncture about what we may or may not be able to transition.
The UN Secretary General went to Pakistan today and said the flood damage there was the worst disaster he has ever seen. Floodwaters have killed more than 1,500 people and cover an area the size of Italy. The U.S. is leading the international aid effort, as we hear from Richard Roth.
More than 2 weeks after floods swamped Pakistan, water was still rising today in a southern town called Jacobabad, and these efforts to divert it weren't making a difference. Officials say 20 million people and a fifth of the country have been affected by this disaster. Where there's shelter, there's poor sanitation, and concern now that cholera will spread. And a cruel irony in all this water is there's so little that's safe to drink. The UN Secretary General called his tour of the country heart-wrenching and called on the world to help.
So many millions are in immediate need of help, the world's help.
The most help so far has come from America, which has pledged more than $70 million in aid and provided a fleet of military helicopters to deliver it. American troops have helped move more than 4,000 people and more than 300,000 pounds of supplies. With even the best-intentioned aid efforts struggling, as this video from Save the Children shows, in Pakistan's rugged terrain, the U.S. sees an opportunity to project expertise and goodwill, boosting America's image on a humanitarian mission with a strategic motive.
So it becomes very important for the Pakistani government and the U.S. government tied to the Pakistani government to get in there with relief, with helicopters, visibly so.
Along with lives to be saved in Pakistan, there are hearts and minds to be won. Richard Roth, CBS News, London.
Just ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, the sweet side to summer heat. Much of the South and Midwest continued to bake today, with excessive heat warnings or advisories posted in 16 states. Temperatures in the high 90s were common and soared above 100 in many spots. As the temperature kept rising in Little Rock, kids tried to beat the heat by keeping wets in a public fountain. And while intense summer heat may be a bane for millions, for many farmers and consumers, the warm weather could actually be a boon to the taste buds. Michelle Miller explains.
It's another sweltering 90-degree day on Pete Demerit's Hillsdale, New Jersey farm, but he's not sweating about his peaches.
The leaves look good. The fruit is starting to size up. It's starting to give us color.
The summer's sizzling temperatures come with a silver lining for some farmers and consumers. Every crop, from peaches to tomatoes to corn, should taste better this year.
Everything that we eat in produce has sugar in it, natural sugar. And the drier it is, the sweet it's going to be.
New Jersey was one of 3 states that had the warmest month of June on record. In all, 34 states stretching from the Northeast to the Southwest had above average temperatures in June, with no signs of changing anytime soon.
We've got this area of high pressure that is stuck right over the central and southeastern part of the country.
So if the heat means misery for most people, some farmers are looking at their best season in years.
And a lot of people are talking about how hot this year is. This is just like an old-fashioned summer. This is what summer's all about.
But there is a downside. Some parts of the country have not seen enough rain to go with the hot weather, and dry conditions are beginning to be a problem.
Kind of a double-edged sword, too. So, you know, too much heat and not enough water can cause negative reaction. But right now, we're looking at a very good production year. We've got a lot of beautiful crops out in the field.
With help from an occasional thunderstorm and good irrigation, Pete Damaris thinks his crops can handle the current heat wave. But he knows the one thing you can't count on is the weather.
You never know. I could have a hailstorm next week.
But for now, Damaris and other farmers like him are harvesting plenty of sun. Michelle Miller, CBS News, New York.
And we'll be back. Power has been restored in Washington, D.C. near the White House after an electrical fire last night sent flames shooting into the air. 2 hotels just a block from the White House were evacuated until the fire was put out. It apparently was sparked by an underground transformer. Overseas, firefighters are trying to control dozens of wildfires raging across much of Brazil. Fueled by low humidity and a lack of rainfall, the fires have destroyed homes and parts of a national park, threatening endangered wildlife. We have an update for you tonight on actress Zsa Zsa Gabor. The 93-year-old Gabor is said to be in extremely serious condition at a Los Angeles hospital where doctors removed 2 blood clots from her upper body. The clots were complications from hip replacement surgery last month. A prosecutor in Buffalo, New York has dropped murder charges against a man arrested yesterday in the weekend shooting deaths of 4 people outside a restaurant. 4 others were wounded. Buffalo police are continuing their investigation. Of course, not every story is black and white, but this one certainly is. 2 privately owned zebras escaped and ran loose in the streets of Sacramento County last night, tying up traffic until they were finally corralled. One of the animals was slightly hurt. Coming up next on tonight's CBS Evening News, could the 3D movie trend be flattening out? The movie Toy Story 3 is a story itself now, becoming the highest-grossing animated film of all time. It's taken in more than $920 million worldwide. Toy Story 3 was made in 3D, a format that some say may be losing some of its luster. Priya David Clemens has more.
From dance showdowns to a battle between man and fish, Hollywood is serving up more in-your-face entertainment than ever before.
Every time I've gone, it's just been really fun, interactive experience, I guess.
6 of this year's top 10 grossing films are in 3D. Total take, $1.6 billion. Yet for some A-list filmmakers, 3D fatigue is setting in.
Lately, it's becoming decidedly uncool to like 3D movies.
Among the leading skeptics, Star Trek director J.J. Abrams.
When you put the glasses on, everything just gets dim. Like it all feels a little sort of gray and muted.
And the man behind Iron Man, Jon Favreau.
Coming next year, 2D, Cowboys and Aliens. Take the money you save and see it twice.
A lot of these great filmmakers are saying to themselves, I don't need 3D. I'm a great storyteller. I don't need this so-called gimmick to bring people into the movie theater.
There's a premium on 3D movies, an extra $3 to $5 per ticket. One reason why Hollywood studios are diving in the 3D deep end.
Rushing 60 3D films to theaters in the next 2 years.
It works for the animated movies, but some of the other movies I've seen, not so much. Outstanding.
Call it the Avatar effect. The global blockbuster raked in $2.7 billion. Despite higher production costs, the studios are fired up.
This is not like the hula hoop, some cheap gimmick or trick that's going to come along and go away. It's here to stay.
Purists say 3D isn't right for all films.
It hasn't changed anything except it's going to make it harder to shoot.
But in Hollywood, money talks.
For the big action films, you think 3D is the way to go?
Yes. Yes, I do. Yeah. Even if it's a couple of dollars more. And as long as the studios hear that, expect to see more 3D at a theater near you.
We all knew this day was coming.
Priya David Clemens, CBS News, Hollywood.
And that is the CBS Evening News. Later on CBS 60 Minutes. Thanks for joining us this Sunday evening. I'm Russ Mitchell, CBS News in New York. Katie Couric will be here tomorrow. Good night.
On television, online, and on the go. CBS News, the most powerful reporting anywhere.